At 12 years old, Elena Mercedes looked a young Apache boy in the eye and made an impossible promise. One day, you're going to be my husband. He just laughed at her. 15 years later, she would return as one of the most powerful women in the country, a force of nature forged in the fires of the city. But back then, she was just a child, standing in the burning Mexican desert where it all began. The golden dust swirled in the hot air the first time Elena saw the boy who would change her life. Her blonde hair was a shock of sunlight against the dry landscape. Her heart hammered in her chest the moment her blue eyes locked with his. They were dark, deep, endless as a moonless night. There he was, Toei, 16 years old, tall and strong, his muscles moving with the grace of a wild cat as he tamed a spirited horse. Something awoke inside Elena, something terrifying and exhilarating, an inexplicable certainty. "You're going to be my husband one day," she whispered, but the wind carried her words straight to his ears. The young Apache stopped. He turned. His gaze met hers with an intensity that made time itself seem to stop. For a single infinite moment, the world disappeared. The heat, the horses, the distant shouts of the ranch hands. All that remained was the invisible thread between them, glowing like gold, woven by fate. He almost looked like he recognized her. Then the spell broke. Tui laughed. It wasn't a cruel laugh. It was amused, almost tender, as if he were humoring a child's fantasy. "Little Elena," his deep voice carried on the desert air, "you're still a child playing house with your dolls." The words struck her like a whip, burning her cheeks with shame. But under the shame, a fire was lit. The nearby ranch hands laughed too, their Spanish jokes blending with the hot wind. Elena's eyes burned, but not with tears. They burned with a silent promise. "You'll see," she murmured, her voice so low, so loaded with conviction, it even startled herself. The words felt like a prophecy. Toei stopped laughing. The smile vanished from his face. The way she spoke, the fierce light in her eyes. It sent a shiver down his spine. For a second, he didn't see a 12-year-old girl. He saw a storm gathering on the horizon. That night, Elena lay awake, staring at the stars. Her small fists clenched the sheets as she made a vow that would shape the next 15 years of her life. "I will grow," she whispered into the darkness. "I'll become strong, beautiful, and powerful. And when I return, Tawa, you'll remember this night." The wind howled outside, as if the desert itself was a witness to her oath. In the next room, her grandfather, Diego, heard her words and smiled. He knew that fire. He saw it in the mirror every morning. "My little lioness," he murmured, "destiny has plans for you." He knew she was no ordinary child. He sensed that her promise to the stars would one day come true, in ways she couldn't yet imagine. But Diego knew something else, a secret he kept locked away in the deepest corner of his heart, a secret that would turn her destiny into a nightmare. The next morning, the news came. Her mother, Carmen, was taking her back to the city, away from the ranch, away from the desert, away from Taui. "It's time for a proper education," Carmen said, her words a prison sentence. Elena's world collapsed, but the fire inside her blazed brighter. This wouldn't be a farewell, it would be a promise. She ran, her golden hair flying like a banner, searching for Toei. She found him by the river, his arrows hitting their mark with deadly precision. "Here to say goodbye to your marriage fantasy, little Elena?" he asked, a playful smile on his lips. But she wasn't the same girl from yesterday. "I'm leaving," she said, her voice steady. "But I will be back, Toei, and when I do, I won't be a little girl anymore." She stepped closer, her blue eyes blazing with an intensity that wiped the smile from his face. "I'll return as a strong, independent, powerful woman, and then you'll see I wasn't playing." The words were a declaration of war against fate. Toei lowered his bow. He saw the fire in her eyes burning with the intensity of 1,000 suns. He felt as if he were looking at his own reflection, at a spirit as wild as his own. "Elena," he said softly, her name sounding different on his lips. "The world is a hard place. You will change." "So will you," she said. "But you already know the truth. We're meant for each other." Her small hand brushed against his arm. A spark of electricity shot between them. She turned to leave, then looked back one last time. 15 years, Toei. Wait for me." The words echoed across the fields as she walked away, each step pulling her farther from the boy she would love her entire life. Toei stood frozen, watching her go. An emptiness opened in his chest. 15 years, he whispered to the wind. He didn't know if it was a farewell or a prayer. And as he stood there, another figure watched from the shadows of the cottonwood trees. An older man, his face a mask of cold calculation. He had heard every word, and he smiled. The girl's promise was playing right into his hands. The city was a monster of glass and steel, and it tried to swallow Elena whole. For months, she cried every night, longing for the desert, for the smell of wildflowers, for the dark, endless eyes of Taui. But her tears were not a sign of weakness. They were fuel. Every morning she woke with a single mission, to become the woman she had promised to be. She devoured books. She learned new languages. She trained her body until it was as strong as her will. By 13, she was unrecognizable. Her mother, Carmen, watched with a mixture of pride and fear. "Elena, why do you push so hard?" Elena would only smile. How could she explain that every achievement was just another stone in the path leading back to Taui? It was a 15-year plan, a work of art fueled by a love that only grew stronger with distance. By 16, she was fluent in 3 languages. By 17, she was working for a top consulting firm, earning her own money, building her independence. At night, she would stare at an old photograph of the ranch. "Just a few more years, Toei," she'd whisper. At 18, she entered university, but her real education was happening outside the classroom. She learned to navigate the world of power and influence. She built a network of contacts. She founded her own company. She blossomed into a woman who turned heads wherever she went. A woman with a magnetic aura of power and mystery that left men speechless. The countdown was almost over. Destiny was calling her name. And in the Mexican desert, Taui was living a life she only knew through her grandfather's letters. He had become the leader of his tribe, respected and admired. He had married a young Apache woman named Itil. They had 2 children. Then 3 years later, it all fell apart. Itil left him for another man. He was never the same after that, Diego wrote. He became quiet, solitary. He never spoke of marriage again. Elena's heart ached for him, but a small, selfish part of her saw it as a sign. The path was being cleared. By 25, Elena was a legend, a titan of industry, a woman who could have anything, anyone she wanted. She received countless marriage proposals, wealthy businessmen, powerful politicians. She refused them all. "My heart already belongs to someone," she would say with a mysterious smile, "even if he doesn't know it yet." At 26, 1 year ahead of schedule, she stood at the peak of her power. Her company was a global force. Her fortune was immense. Her beauty was breathtaking. It was time. The final stage of her plan began. She sold 2 of her companies, keeping only the one she could run from anywhere. Then she bought a magnificent property just a few miles from her grandfather's ranch, a modern hacienda, a palace in the desert. For 6 months, as the hacienda was being built, rumors flew. A wealthy, mysterious woman was coming. A woman of incredible power and beauty. Elena fueled the rumors from the shadows. She funded community projects, sponsored festivals, created jobs. She became a ghost benefactor, a name on everyone's lips, but a face no one had seen. Toei, as the leader of his tribe, heard it all. He must have wondered. He must have been curious. Then came the call from her grandfather that changed everything. "Elena," Diego's voice trembled. "Toei came to see me today. He asked, he asked if I'd heard from you. The blonde girl from so long ago. He said he's been dreaming about you. He can't stop thinking about the promise you made." Her heart exploded in her chest. He remembered. After all these years, her plan was working. The universe was bending to her will. The stage was set for her return. The annual San Miguel Festival. The entire region would be there, including Toei. She commissioned a dress of gold and sapphire, a gown fit for a queen. Standing before the mirror in her new palace, she whispered to her reflection, "The time has come, Toei. Get ready to see what that little girl has become." But in the desert, another plan was also coming to fruition. A darker plan, 15 years in the making. A plan that would turn her triumphant return into a fight for her life. The night of the San Miguel festival was a tapestry of stars and colored lights. Elena arrived at the height of the celebration. She stepped out of a sleek black car, and the world stopped. Conversations died. The music faded. She was a vision, a goddess in gold and sapphire. Her hair was a river of molten gold, her eyes two burning blue stars. She moved through the crowd with the grace of a queen, a magnetic force that pulled every eye toward her. "Elena?" People whispered in disbelief. "Our little Elena?" She smiled, and the warmth of it melted their shock. Then she felt him. Even before she saw him, she knew he was there. The crowd parted, and there he was. Towie, 31 years old. More striking than she had remembered. His face was etched with the wisdom of a man who had lived and lost. His eyes, those dark, endless eyes, found hers across the crowded plaza. 15 years collapsed into a single breathless moment. He was frozen, staring at the woman she had become. The impossible promise, made flesh. The little girl who had declared he would be her husband now stood before him, a force of nature that made every other man in the plaza seem like a shadow. She walked toward him. Each step was a drumbeat, counting down the years of their separation. The crowd, the music, the lights, it all faded away. There was only the two of them. "Hello, Towie," she said, her voice a soft melody that carried 15 years of longing. "I told you I'd come back." The words broke the spell. He looked into her eyes and saw the same fire, now burning with a strength that was impossible to resist. "Elena," he whispered, his voice full of awe. "I always keep my promises," she said, closing the distance between them. "And the promise I made to you still stands." Towie's world tilted. This woman could have anyone, yet she had come back. For him. "Elena, you don't understand," he began, his voice rough with an emotion he couldn't name. "I'm not the boy you knew. I have scars, responsibilities." Her smile was an act of pure grace. "Do you think I don't know that? I know everything, Towie. I know about your failed marriage. I know about your children. I know about the lonely nights you spend wondering if anyone in this world truly understands you." His defenses crumbled. "I didn't transform myself in spite of you," she said, her voice dropping to an intimate whisper. "I did it because of you. Every achievement, every victory, it was all so I could stand before you today and say, I choose you. Not because I have no other options, but because out of all the options in the world, you are the only one." He reached out, his hand trembling, and touched her face. "You did all this? For me?" "For us," she corrected softly. And in that moment, he threw away all caution, all tradition, all fear. He pulled her into his arms and kissed her with the force of 15 years of suppressed desire. The world exploded in a shower of sparks. The crowd cheered, but they heard nothing but the pounding of their own hearts, finally beating in unison. But as they stood there, wrapped in a love that had defied time and distance, neither of them saw the two figures watching from the shadows. One was Itil, Towie's ex-wife, her face a mask of cold fury. The other was a man whose presence meant that Elena's perfectly crafted plan was about to go horribly, violently wrong. The weeks that followed were a dream. Elena and Towie were inseparable, rediscovering each other under the vast desert sky. They shared the stories of their years apart, the triumphs and the heartbreaks. "My marriage failed because I could never forget you," Towie confessed one night, his voice thick with emotion. "I was always comparing her to the memory of a little girl with fire in her eyes." Elena's heart soared. She hadn't been alone in her long, patient wait, but their perfect world was built on a fault line, and the tremors were just beginning. Elena's arrival had shaken the community. Some saw their love as a fairy tale. Others saw her as an outsider, a threat. A woman with that much power, that much money. She was a disruption to the old ways. The first crack appeared when a series of small, strange accidents began to plague the Apache village. A fire in a storage shed, a poison well. Nothing that could be traced, but the message was clear. Someone wanted Elena gone. Then came the confrontation. Itil, Toei's ex-wife, appeared at Elena's hacienda, her eyes burning with a venom that chilled Elena to the bone. "You think you can just come back and take what's mine?" Itil spat. "He is the father of my children. He belongs with his own kind." "I love him," Elena said simply. "Love?" Itil laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "You love the idea of him, the fantasy you built in your head for 15 years. You don't know the man. You don't know this life. I'm learning." "You'll learn," Edel sneered. "You'll learn that you don't belong here. And if you're smart, you'll leave before something terrible happens." The threat was unmistakable. That night, Elena found Towie staring into the fire, his face a mask of worry. "Itil came to see me," she said. He nodded. "I know. She is bitter, but she is not dangerous." But Elena wasn't so sure. And there was something else, a shadow she had seen in the hills, the same man who had been watching them at the festival. "Who is Ricardo Vargas?" she asked, the name dropping into the quiet room like a stone. Toei went rigid, every muscle in his body tensed. "Where did you hear that name?" "He's a local landowner, isn't he? A powerful one. My sources tell me he's been buying up land all around your village. Quietly. For years." "He is an enemy of my people," Toei said, his voice a low growl. "His family and mine have been at war for generations. Over land. Over water. Over honor. And he was at the festival," Elena said, "watching us." A cold dread began to creep up her spine. This wasn't just about a bitter ex-wife. This was about something much older, much more dangerous. Her grandfather, Diego, confirmed her fears. "Vargas is a snake," he told her, his voice grim. "He wants the Apache land. It's rumored to have a rich vein of silver running through it. He's been trying to drive them out for years. Your return, it complicates things for him." "How?" "You bring power, money, influence. You could help Toei fight back in a way he never could before." The pieces started to click into place. The accidents, Idil's threats. It wasn't just jealousy. It was a coordinated attack. Vargas was using Idil, preying on her bitterness, turning her into a weapon against them. The escalation came swiftly. One of Toei's children, his 6-year-old son Miguel, went missing. Panic ripped through the village. They searched for hours, their calls echoing through the canyons. Elena, using the skills she had honed in the city, organized the search with a calm efficiency that impressed even the most hardened Apache warriors. She coordinated teams, studied maps, used logic to narrow down the search area. It was Towie who finally found him. Miguel was huddled in a small cave, cold and terrified, but unharmed. "A man gave me a sweet," the boy whispered, his small body trembling in his father's arms. "He said he was a friend of my mother's. He told me to wait here for her." Itil. She had used her own son as a pawn in Vargas's sick game. The confrontation was brutal. Toei faced his ex-wife, his voice shaking with a rage and betrayal that was terrible to behold. "You would risk our son's life? For what? For pride? For Vargas's empty promises?" Edel broke down, sobbing, confessing everything. Vargas had promised her money, a new life, a way to win Toei back. He had convinced her that Elena was the enemy. "He's planning something, Toei," she cried. "Something terrible. He's going to attack the village during the new moon ceremony. He thinks you'll be distracted. He plans to wipe you out." The truth was a slap in the face. This was no longer just about land. This was about annihilation. And it was happening in 3 days. They were out of time. The law was in Vargas's pocket. They were on their own. "What do we do?" Elena asked, her mind racing, analyzing the situation like a business problem. Toei looked at her, and in his eyes she saw not a leader or a warrior, but just a man, terrified of losing everything he loved. "We fight," he said. But it was Elena who saw the path to victory. It wasn't through bows and arrows. It was through something Vargas would never see coming. "He thinks we're going to fight his way," she said, a new, dangerous light in her eyes. "With violence. But we're going to fight my way. With the truth." She had one chance to uncover the secret that would destroy Ricardo Vargas. One chance to save the man she loved and the people who had become her own. And she had 72 hours to do it. The plan was audacious. It was reckless. It was their only hope. While Taui and his warriors prepared the village for an attack they hoped would never come, Elena launched a different kind of war. She used her fortune and her network of contacts to hire the best private investigators in the country. She turned them loose on Ricardo Vargas, telling them to dig into every corner of his life, every business deal, every dirty secret. I want to know everything, she told them. His finances, his political connections, the skeletons in his closet. I want to know where he buried the bodies. For 2 days, information trickled in. Vargas was more powerful, more corrupt than they had even imagined. He had judges, politicians, lawmen in his pocket. He had built an empire on bribery and intimidation. But there was no smoking gun, nothing that could stop him in time. On the final day, with the new moon just hours away, Elena sat in her hacienda, surrounded by piles of documents, staring at a dead end. Tui came to her, his face grim. My scouts report Vargas's men are gathering at the edge of our land. They will attack at midnight. Despair, cold and sharp, threatened to overwhelm her. She had come so far. She had fought so hard. Was it all for nothing? There's something we're missing, she murmured, running her hands through her hair. Some piece of the puzzle. Her grandfather Diego had been sitting quietly in the corner, watching her. He finally spoke, his voice heavy with the weight of a secret he had carried for decades. There is something I never told you, Elena. Something about your grandmother. Elena looked up, her attention captured. Before she married me, she was in love with another man. A good man. His name was Alejandro Vargas. The name hit Elena like a physical blow. Vargas? As in Ricardo Vargas? Diego nodded. Ricardo's older brother. They were rivals, for land, for power, for your grandmother's heart. Ricardo was always the ruthless one. Alejandro was the dreamer. He paused, his eyes dark with old memories. Alejandro disappeared one night. Everyone assumed he had just left, run off to seek his fortune elsewhere. Ricardo inherited everything. He married the woman Alejandro had been courting. A few months later, your grandmother married me. Elena's mind was racing, connecting the dots. You think Ricardo did something to him? I know he did, Diego said, his voice a low whisper. The night Alejandro disappeared, I saw Ricardo riding back from the direction of the Apache lands. There was blood on his saddle. Why didn't you go to the law? Diego's laugh was bitter. The law was already in Ricardo's pocket, even back then, and I had no proof, just a suspicion, and I had your grandmother to protect. The Apache lands, the blood on his saddle. Suddenly, Elena knew. She remembered a story Toei had told her, a story passed down through generations of his people, a story about a sacred cave deep in the mountains, a place where the spirits of the earth were said to speak, a place where a white man had been buried long ago, a man who had been a friend to the Apache. Tawi, she said, her voice electric with urgency. The cave, the one your people call the Whispering Tomb. We have to go there. Now. It was a race against time. They rode hard, pushing their horses through the treacherous mountain terrain. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of blood and fire. They reached the cave just as the first stars began to appear. It was hidden behind a waterfall, its entrance shrouded in mist. Inside, the air was cold and still. In the center of the cave, there was a single unmarked grave, built from stones piled by Apache hands. My ancestors buried him here, Toei said, his voice full of reverence. He was a friend. He respected our ways. They found him at the base of the cliff, a bullet in his back. With trembling hands, Elena and Towie began to move the stones. Underneath, they found the skeletal remains of a man, and around his neck, on a tarnished silver chain, was a locket. Elena opened it. Inside were two faded portraits. One was of a young, smiling woman, her grandmother. The other was a man with kind eyes and a dreamer's smile. Alejandro Vargas. But it was what was tucked behind the portraits that changed everything. A small, folded piece of paper, a letter written in a shaky hand. It was Alejandro's last will and testament. In it, he left everything. His land, his fortune, his entire estate. not to his ruthless brother, but to the Apache tribe who had been his friends, and to the woman he loved. And he detailed his brother's threats, his fear that Ricardo would kill him to get the land. It was the proof they needed, the smoking gun. But as they stood there, holding the truth in their hands, they heard a sound from the mouth of the cave, a cold, mocking laugh. Ricardo Vargas stood there, a rifle in his hands, flanked by a dozen of his men. "Looking for this?" he sneered. "I figured you'd put the pieces together eventually. My brother was always a sentimental fool, but his secrets die tonight, along with both of you." The new moon had risen. Outside the cave, the world was plunged into darkness. It was midnight. The attack on the village was about to begin, and Elena and Toei were trapped. The cave was a death trap. Vargas and his men stood silhouetted against the moonless sky, their rifles aimed. "Give me the locket, Elena," Vargas said, his voice dangerously calm, "and I might let you live." It was a lie. They all knew it. Toei moved, placing his body in front of Elena's, a human shield. "You'll have to kill me first." "That can be arranged," Vargas sneered. But Elena had seen something Vargas hadn't. A narrow fissure in the back of the cave, hidden in the shadows. An escape route. "The waterfall," she whispered to Toei. "The legend says it hides a second path." It was a desperate gamble, a story told to children, but it was their only chance. As Vargas's men advanced, Elena created a diversion. She threw a handful of dust into the air, momentarily blinding them. In the confusion, she and Toei scrambled toward the fissure. They plunged into the darkness of the narrow tunnel, the sound of gunshots echoing behind them. They could hear Vargas's men in pursuit, their angry shouts getting closer. The tunnel twisted and turned, leading them deeper into the mountain. It ended abruptly at a sheer rock face, a dead end. They were trapped. But as Vargas and his men closed in, their lanterns flooding the tunnel with light, Toei saw it. A series of ancient handholds carved into the rock, leading straight up. "It's a spirit path," he breathed. "Only the tribe's shamans know of it." He helped Elena start the climb, their hands and feet finding purchase on the worn stone. They climbed, the shouts of their pursuers growing fainter below. They emerged onto a high ledge, gasping for air. The night sky spread out above them like a blanket of diamonds. Below them, they could see the lights of the Apache village. And they could see something else. Fires. Vargas had split his forces. Half were in the cave. The other half were attacking the village. "My people," Toei whispered, his face a mask of anguish. But just as all hope seemed lost, a new sound filled the night. Hoofbeats. Dozens of them. A posse of riders, storming down from the hills, their guns blazing. It was Elena's grandfather, Diego. He had ridden to the neighboring ranches, to the people Elena had helped, and he had rallied them. And leading the charge, riding beside Diego, was a figure that made Toei's heart stop. Till. She had chosen her people over her pride. The battle was short and brutal. Vargas's men, caught between the Apache warriors in the village and the ranchers at their back, were quickly overwhelmed. Vargas himself, trapped in the cave, was cornered. When the posse arrived, he was a madman, raving about his stolen birthright. His empire of lies had crumbled to dust. Dawn was breaking as Elena and Towie made their way down from the mountain. The village was safe. Their people were safe. They found Edel tending to the wounded, her face streaked with soot and tears. She looked up as they approached, and the two women shared a look of understanding, of shared sacrifice. In the end, it wasn't just Elena who had saved them. It was two women from two different worlds, united by their love for the same man and the same people. The will was legal. The Apache tribe, under Toei's leadership, became the rightful owners of the Vargas lands. The silver that had been the source of so much conflict was now a source of prosperity for the community. A few weeks later, under a sky as blue as her eyes, Elena and Toei were married. The ceremony was a blend of two cultures, a symbol of the new world they would build together. Diego watched, his eyes shining with pride. Itil stood with her children, her heart finally at peace. Elena had made a promise 15 years ago, a promise born from a child's heart. She had fulfilled it with the strength and wisdom of a queen. She had come back for her husband. And in doing so, she had saved a people, righted an old wrong, and proven that the most powerful force in the world isn't money or power. It's a love that is brave enough to wait. Elena's story is a powerful reminder that with enough determination, we can rewrite our own destinies. What promise have you made to yourself that you are still fighting to keep? Share your story in the comments below. And if you were inspired by this tale of love and perseverance, don't forget to subscribe. We have more stories of the untamed West coming your way. Stories that will capture your heart and stir your soul. Thank you for joining us. Derek Langston stared at the wooden boards beneath his boots, and a cold feeling washed over him. Something was wrong. The floor of his barn had always been solid, built by his grandfather 40 years ago. But now, right here in this corner, it echoed. A hollow sound. He'd lived on this ranch his whole life. He knew every creak of the house, every groan of the fences. He had never heard this before. His grandfather had built this place with his own two hands. There were no secrets here. There couldn't be. Derek grabbed a crowbar. The first board groaned in protest. The second splintered. The third came loose with a sucking sound. What lay beneath defied all logic. A dark, rectangular hole. Wooden steps, worn smooth from use, descended into blackness. But that was impossible. His grandfather had been dead for 15 years. Derek had lived here alone ever since. He lowered himself into the opening, struck a match, and his blood turned to ice. Footprints. Fresh footprints in the thick dust. Someone had been down here. Recently. But he was the only person on this ranch for miles. He didn't even know this place existed. The match flame trembled in his hand, revealing a carefully constructed tunnel. This wasn't some root cellar. This was professional. Planned. The tunnel stretched into the darkness. But at the very edge of the light, he saw something that made him question his own sanity. A leather chair, a small table. It looked like someone was living down here. For 35 years, Derek had walked on this ground, sleeping peacefully in the house just a few yards away. All while a secret world existed right under his feet, a world someone was still using. The question wasn't just who built this tunnel, it was who was living in it, and why had they finally let him find it now? Derek lit another match and stepped deeper into the underground room. The leather chair was positioned facing the entrance, as if someone had been sitting there watching, waiting. On the table next to it, a tin cup was still damp. Crumbs on a plate hadn't yet gathered dust. Someone had been here today, maybe just hours ago. His hands shook as he looked around. A wool blanket, neatly folded on a cot, a stack of books against the far wall. This wasn't a hiding place. This was a home. He picked up a book. On the inside cover, in his grandfather's elegant script, were the words, "Property of Samuel Langston, 1851. But these books had never been in the house. He'd been through every one of his grandfather's possessions. Under the table was a metal box. He opened it. Inside were deeds to properties he'd never heard of. Letters from strangers, and at the bottom a photograph. 3 men stood in front of this very barn, but the barn looked new. One of the men was his grandfather, younger than Derek had ever seen him. The other 2 were strangers, but their faces sparked a disturbing flicker of recognition. He turned the photo over. His grandfather's handwriting. The agreement holds. The land stays divided. No one speaks of what happened here. SL 1852. What agreement? What had happened on this land that demanded such secrecy? His match burned down to his fingers, searing his skin. He lit another. Fresh candle wax on the table. Ash in a small dish. Someone had been living here, comfortably, but this was his land, his inheritance. No one else had a claim. Then he heard it. Footsteps directly above his head. Someone was in his barn, walking with the confidence of an owner. But Derek lived alone. He had no neighbors. He wasn't expecting any visitors. Whoever lived in this tunnel had just come home. Derek blew out the match, plunging himself into darkness. He pressed his back against the cold earthen wall, his heart hammering against his ribs. The footsteps stopped, directly over the hidden opening. Then a woman's voice, clear and calm, cut through the silence. "You can come up now, Derek. I know you're down there." He froze. She knew his name. "I'm not going anywhere until you tell me what this is," he called back, his voice rough. "That's what I'm here for," she replied. "But I'd rather not shout through the floor." A beat of silence. My name is Olivia Harrow. I've been waiting 3 months for you to find that tunnel. Derek climbed the steps, his mind a whirlwind. A woman stood in the center of his barn. She was about his age, with dark hair and intelligent, watchful eyes. How do you know my name? I know a great deal about you, Derek Langston, she said, pulling a thick folder from a leather satchel. And I know you're about to learn the truth about your grandfather. My grandfather was an honest man. Her expression was grim. Your grandfather was part of something that was meant to stay buried forever. But the time has come to settle the account. She handed him a document. A contract dated 1852 in his grandfather's handwriting. It spoke of shared ownership, concealment. At the bottom were 3 signatures: Samuel Langston, Thomas Harrow, and William Cross. Thomas Harrow was my grandfather, Olivia said. And according to this, my family owns 1/3 of the land you're standing on. The contract expires next month. We've come to reclaim our property. Derek's world tilted. Impossible. I have the deed. You have one deed, she corrected. There are 2 others, and the families who hold them are on their way. As if on cue, the sound of horses and wagons echoed across the valley. Wait, Derek said, a new, chilling thought taking hold. The person living in the tunnel, it wasn't you? I've never been down there in my life, Olivia said, a flicker of concern in her eyes. But if someone else has been using it, show me what you found. He led her back down. She examined the candle wax, the damp cup, the neatly folded blanket. This changes everything, she whispered. What was the secret? Derek demanded. What did our grandfathers find? Her face was pale in the matchlight. Something valuable. So valuable they agreed to share it in secret, to hide it from the government. My grandfather's papers called it the discovery that would change everything. The sound of horses grew louder, closer. Multiple wagons, many men. Those aren't my people, Olivia said, her voice tight with alarm. I came alone. Then it has to be the third family, Derek realized, the descendants of William Cross. A man's voice boomed from above. Miss Harrow, Mr. Langston, we know you're here. There's no point in hiding. The contract is almost up. We've come to collect what our family is owed. Then a new sound, metal scraping wood, from another part of the barn. They're opening another entrance, Olivia breathed. The barn floor groaned as heavy boots descended wooden steps from the far side of the tunnel. A lantern's glow appeared, casting long, menacing shadows. 3 figures approached. The man in the lead was tall, with sharp features that Derek recognized instantly from the old photograph. Marcus Cross, the man said, and you must be Samuel Langston's grandson. He gestured to the 2 younger men with him. My sons have been maintaining this place for months, living here in shifts, waiting for you to finally uncover your inheritance. Derek's mind reeled. You've been living down here? Someone had to protect the assets, Marcus said coldly. What assets? Olivia demanded. Marcus smiled, a predator's smile. He walked to a section of the tunnel wall and pressed a hidden panel. It slid aside, revealing a dark opening. A cool, metallic scent wafted out. Silver, Marcus announced. A rich vein, running right under this property. Your grandfathers built this entire tunnel system to mine it in secret. No taxes, no government claims. For 50 years, the silver has been accumulating in these chambers, waiting for this day. He stepped into the opening, holding his lantern high. But before we divide the profits, he said, his voice hardening, we need to know if you intend to honor the agreement. One of his sons rushed forward, whispering urgently in his ear. Marcus's face went white. Impossible, he breathed. You're certain? It's empty, Father, the son said, his voice shaking. The back chamber is completely empty. Someone has been here before us. The back chamber was a cavern of ghosts. Wooden shelves lined the walls, empty. Metal containers lay open, empty. Mining tools were scattered across the floor. 50 years of work, Marcus Cross whispered, his voice trembling with rage. Generations of secret labor, all gone. Derek knelt, examining the tools. These have been used recently. Someone's been working down here for months, one of Marcus's sons confirmed. We found fresh tool marks, new support beams. Olivia picked up a scrap of paper from the floor. It's a transport record for raw silver ore. It's dated 3 months ago. 3 months. The exact time Olivia had been waiting for him. Marcus turned on her, his eyes blazing with suspicion. Convenient timing, Miss Harrow. You arrived to claim your share just as the silver disappears. I had nothing to do with this, Olivia protested. How did you know to come here? Derek demanded. Olivia hesitated. A lawyer in town, a James Edwards. He contacted me, said he had papers from my grandfather. There's no lawyer named Edwards in town, Derek said flatly. The office he described has been empty for years. The silence in the tunnel was thick and cold. We've been played, Marcus said, his voice a low growl. All three families. Someone knew everything. They knew about the silver, the contract. They manipulated us into coming here at the same time, so we'd tear each other apart while they got away clean. But who else could have known? Olivia whispered. Someone our grandfathers trusted, Derek said, the old photograph flashing in his mind. Someone they betrayed. Slow, deliberate applause echoed from the main chamber. A woman stepped into the lantern light. She was in her 60s, with silver hair and eyes that burned with a cold, patient fire. Excellent, she said. You're all finally starting to understand. Who are you? Marcus demanded. My name is Elena Vasquez. My grandfather was Roberto Vasquez, the man who discovered the silver vein in 1851. Her gaze swept over them, sharp and unforgiving. The man your grandfathers murdered and buried on this property so they could steal his claim. The words hit Derek like a physical blow. That's a lie. My grandfather was an honest man. Your grandfather was a killer, Elena said, her voice like ice. He and Thomas Harrow and William Cross. They murdered my grandfather in cold blood and built this entire operation on top of his grave. She pulled a worn leather journal from her coat. This was his. He wrote everything down. The discovery, his partnership with your grandfathers, his growing fear that they would betray him. She opened the journal. His last entry. They have agreed to meet me at dawn in the tunnel system. I pray I am wrong about my suspicions, but I fear I will not see another sunrise. Olivia gasped. The sealed chambers weren't for storing silver, Elena finished grimly. They were for hiding a body. I found his remains 3 months ago. How? Marcus whispered. I've spent 30 years hunting for the truth, Elena said, her voice trembling with the force of her long-held grief and anger. And when I found him, I decided to take back what was stolen from my family. She smiled, a cold, triumphant smile. Every ounce of silver from this mine belonged to us. I simply collected it. I created the fake lawyer. I brought you all here. I wanted you to see the truth with your own eyes. I wanted you to know that your family's fortunes were built on a foundation of murder. The silver, Marcus demanded. Where is it? Elena's smile widened. It's building schools and hospitals for my grandfather's real descendants. It's giving the Vasquez family a name that means something other than victim. She turned to leave. It was never yours to begin with. Derek's world had shattered. His entire life, his inheritance, his very identity was a lie, stained with the blood of a murdered man. Show me, he said, his voice hollow. Elena led them to a hidden chamber behind a false wall. There in the dirt lay the skeletal remains of a man. A silver crucifix lay beside him, and in the back of his skull, a single damning bullet hole. They shot him from behind, Elena said. Olivia sank to her knees, sobbing. We thought they were pioneers. They were monsters. The question now, Elena said, her voice softening slightly, is what you will do with this knowledge. Derek looked at the bones of the man his grandfather had killed. He looked at the empty shelves that had once held a stolen fortune. He looked at the land, his land, now tainted forever. I can't live here, he said, the words coming from a place deep inside him. I can't work land that was bought with blood. What are you saying? Marcus asked, his face pale. I'm saying this property belongs to Elena. The house, the barn, all of it. I'm signing it over. Derek, you can't, Olivia cried. Everything I thought I had was a lie, he said, his voice firm. I refuse to build my life on a foundation of murder. 3 days later, Derek stood in a lawyer's office. his hands steady as he signed away the only home he had ever known. Elena had insisted on paying him a fair price for the property. He would use it to start over. Somewhere new, somewhere clean. Marcus Cross and his sons had done the same. Even Olivia had walked away from the blood money. Roberto will finally have a proper burial, Elena said, taking the deed. After 50 years, he will rest in peace. As Derek mounted his horse, ready to ride west into an unknown future, he felt a weight lift from his shoulders. The legacy of his grandfather, a legacy of guilt and lies, was no longer his to carry. He had lost his home. He had lost his past. But for the first time in his 35 years, Derek Langston was finally free. Some secrets can't stay buried forever, and sometimes the only way to build an honest future is to tear down a dishonest past. What would you have done in Derek's shoes? Would you have kept the land or walked away from the tainted legacy? Let us know in the comments. If you enjoyed this story of justice and redemption, don't forget to subscribe. We've got more unforgettable tales from the frontier coming your way, where honor and truth are worth more than any hidden treasure.